So the Sorcerous Cup is the flavor of choice for June in the Silph Arena for competitive Pokemon Go PvP. If you don't know what the Silph Arena is, link in the description to information on the Silph Arena so you can get learned up. For those of you that are in the know, well, I think you already have a good idea of what the Sorcerous Cup is all about. In this video, I'm going to help simplify the Sorcerous Cup meta, give you some team building tips, and let you know what you should look out for in the Sorcerous Cup. And as per usual, I'm going to be using the Sorcerous Cup Meta Simplified infographic from Lorman96 from the Game Press crew to help guide this information along. And as far as team building goes, Lorma hit the nail on the head here with the graphic. These 5 primary groups are going to be the main ones you're going to want to dip in to get your team all figured out. Now, as far as which Pokemon you want to pick from each group and what your spicy 6th option is going to be, well, that's why you got this wizard here guiding you through the Sorcerous Cup. First order of business, the staples. The Sorcerous Cup really doesn't have any staple Pokemon, like ones that you must have on every single team in order to function well, like other cups do, which is kind of interesting. The closest thing we have to a staple is Alolan Muk, because Alolan Muk is very flexible, versatile. If it's got enough snarls behind it or the right shield situation, it can overcome just about everything in this cup, which is pretty nice. So if you don't have a good Alolan Muk already, well, the time has come. However, after June 20th, which is Beedrill Community Day, Beedrill is absolutely a staple with the Drill Run for the Sorcerous Cup. Basically, it does the same thing that the fighting types do, roll-wise, and it beats them. And it beats the fairy type Pokemon very consistently, which these guys can't do, not even Toxicroak. So once Beedrill hits the scene, the Sorcerous Cup is going to be a little bit different in flavor, and Beedrill will absolutely be a staple Pokemon for every single team. Before June 20th, a Pokemon I would slightly consider to be a staple would be Wigglytuff, and that's just because without the threat of Beedrill, Wigglytuff is kind of unhinged in the Sorcerous Cup, which I will talk about when I get to it. So the first group we have here are the Normal Darks, and their main claim to fame is that they can hammer down on the Confusion Pokemon really well. On top of that, they also have good neutral matchups against everything in this cup. For the most part, given the right situation, they can overcome everything on this graphic, which is pretty nice. Overall, I'd say when building a team early on, it could be well worth it to consider using 2 of these Pokemon from this group and then filling in the blank spaces with the other Pokemon. But 2 here, yeah, could be really good, just because they're so flexible, versatile. Now on Alolan Muk, you might be thinking, what about that Poison Jab moveset, Ryan Swag? Couldn't that be nice? It could, but I feel like Skuntank does the job a bit better. A Poison Jab Alolan Muk, aside from subverting expectations a little bit, is going to be a worse Skuntank. And definitely, in the context of this cup, would be a worse Alolan Muk overall, just because you really do want the Snarl energy gains to get a lot of your matchups in. Then as far as the Normal Darks are concerned, they're really good at swapping in on the Frostlass, which is nice. In the 2-shield situation, the Dark Poisons will probably go down, but these guys with their Dark and Ghost type coverage can persevere against the Frostlass pretty consistently, which is nice. Main reasons to consider them. I'd say Munchlax is probably the most general of the bunch. If you do want to turn up the heat on your opponent, you could go with the Alolan Raticate, which beats everything in this group, dominates the Confusion users extremely well, and does really well against both the Frostlass and Noctowl, so yeah. But it does come with the weakness of Fairy and Fighting, double weakness to Fighting, so Alolan Raticate could be a little bit risky. Then when it comes to the Linoon's kind of like a personal team comp choice. It does have Thunder and Grass Knot, which can help it against, flying and water type Pokemon pretty well, and it's got the Dig for the ground type coverage, but it can be a little bit awkward in this cup, I'd have to say, so you might want to stick with Munchlax unless you got something bigger going on in your mind. So if the Normal Darks are so powerful and versatile, well, what beats them consistently? Well, that's these guys here, the Fighting type Pokemon, and Beedrill. After June 20th, which is Beedrill's Community Day, the Drill Run Beedrill is going to basically be a staple and will be the for sure pick for this group. Until then, you're going to be debating between Toxicroak and Medicham. As far as these two are concerned, they have slight advantages over each other. They can both beat each other given the right circumstances. In the 2-shield, I believe Medicham does have the advantage, but Toxicroak has some advantages of its own. So definitely a little twisty trying to figure out which one you want to use. I'd say to really nail it down, Medicham's main thing is that it can beat the Bronzong. Bronzong hits it for neutral, Medicham hits it for neutral. Medicham's got better attacks than Bronzong does, so it beats the Bronzong. As far as Toxicroak is concerned, definitely loses to the Confusion users really quickly, which could be an advantage if you're trying to trap them. And it's got the Poison type attacks, so it's able to handle the Fairy type Pokemon in a pinch. Beyond that, it's it's kind of a dice roll which one is the quote-unquote better for the cup. Another thing you could put in Medicham's court is that it is a little bit more unpredictable. Does it have Psychic? Does it have Power Up Punch? Does it have Dynamic Punch? Does it have Ice Punch? All of these attacks can have their applications in the Sorcerous Cup, and yeah, until your opponent knows what exact moveset you have, they don't know. So that could be another boon for the Medicham. Overall, I'd have to say I'm a little bit in favor of the Toxicroak here, but Medicham definitely has its advantages. And of course, after June 20th, Beedrill just kind of takes over the scene and makes this the Beedrill group. After the fighting type Pokemon, or the Beedrill group, the next group to talk about is the Confusion users. Yeah, Beedrill or not, the Confusion users are going to hammer this group home, and they can hammer most things in the cup pretty well just by, using that heavy Confusion. What do you want from them? It's pretty simple. You use Confusion, you win. But which Confusion user are you going to pick? Prior to June 20th, I'm in favor of the Bronzong, and the main reason why is because without Beedrill on the scene, being hot and powerful, Wigglytuff goes almost unchecked. If you don't have a Steel-type Pokemon or a Poison-type Pokemon that actually resists Fairy-type damage, such as Tentacruel or the Grass Poisons here, then Wigglytuff can run wild through your team. So if you don't have that resistance, Wigglytuff can just swap in, doesn't have to think, uses one shield, maybe two, and it secures switch advantage for your opponent. So by having the Bronzong, you can kind of stave that off a little bit. The risk with using Bronzong, however, is that the Shadow Ball Hypnos, they'll beat you. Hypno comes in, it's got Shadow Ball. What do you got? Bulldoze? Yeah, I think we know who wins that fight. But I think the advantages kind of outweigh that a little bit. On the flip side, we do have Hypno. Hypno's really good because, uses Confusion, also has Shadow Ball, has Thunder Punch for that bait. That Thunder Punch is also pretty nasty to these flying and water type Pokemon as well. And Hypno does have the potential to beat the Charm users. For example, if you lead with something that can actually kind of hurt them with their fast moves, and then you swap in the Hypno, then you're probably going to win the fast move race there to take them out. So Hypno definitely not out of the game when it comes to the Charm attackers. Now if you want to know about the secret spice that you only get from watching SwagTips, Focus Blast Hypno. Still use the Thunder Punch, but Focus Blast instead of Shadow Ball. The reason why is because Shadow Ball and Focus Blast are both kind of those contingency moves. For the most part, Hypno is going to be throwing Thunder Punches, or at least trying to bait shields with Thunder Punches. It's relatively rare that you're actually going to use the Shadow Ball, or in the Spice case, the Focus Blast. But the Focus Blast does have more targets than the Shadow Ball does. You throw Focus Blast, and this whole group that thinks they have this game in the bag are annihilated. So consider that when you're thinking about Hypno. The main thing you lose is going to be the Hypno Mirror if they have the Shadow Ball. But personally, using Double Punch Hypno in the Voyager Cup myself, I rarely felt like I needed Shadow Ball, and the Mirror rarely came up even though Hypno is everywhere. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. But if you are concerned about it, Shadow Ball is the consistency, if you will. But Focus Blast can be pretty heavy. Definitely think about doing Focus Blast. It means if I use Hypno in this cup, anybody that fights me is just going to know right away it's going to be Focus Blast. You could consider going with two of them, but the fact that people are probably going to be running two of these, and a lot of people are going to be using Frostlass, it might be a little bit risky to go with two Confusion users, but could work out. Next group on our list of groups is the Fairy type Pokemon. And man, these two Pokemon could not be any different from each other. Yeah, Wigglytuff uses Charm, so it's kind of like a Confusion user, and just Charm stuff down. Unlike Confusion, it doesn't have a whole lot of resistances in this particular cup outside of Steel type Pokemon and Fringe Poison type Pokemon. In fact, a lot of people might not be all that prepared for the Wigglytuff, which can let Wigglytuff run right through them. Of course, after June 20th, Beedrill will basically be a staple. Everyone will want to use it. If they don't use it, that's their problem. And Wigglytuff is going to have a hard time after that. So I feel like prior to June 20th, any cups you do, you're probably going to want to go with Wigglytuff. It's almost a staple. But after June 20th, you might want to think twice about bringing in Wigglytuff because of the Beedrill. When editing, I realized I didn't mention the other Charm users. I feel Wigglytuff is probably going to be it for this particular cup. You could consider going with a double Charm strat. That could work out before the 20th, but I feel like your opponent would have to be like significantly unprepared for Charm to begin with for that to work out. It just feels a little bit too risky in this particular meta. And as far as using Gramble instead of Wigglytuff because it has better charge moves and it can hit them earlier, those charge moves are a bit more resisted in this particular cup as well, and the lack of bulk definitely can hamper it, especially when you're up against other confusion users such as Hypno and Wigglytuff, which is, before June 20th, they're probably going to be everywhere. Yeah, I don't think Granbull's going to have a good time. So, Wiggly only. And swag out. Then we have Azumarill. And Azumarill is just a tricky bag of tricks type Pokemon in this cup. It definitely has a lot of vulnerabilities. I mean, the Beedrill can beat it, the Toxicroak can beat it, these two guys can beat it, Wigglytuff can beat it, the Confusion users can overcome it, and the Poison Darks can also overcome it. So the deck is kind of stacked against Azumarill. That all said, it's Azumarill, man. So if it has a bit of an energy lead, shield advantage, it could be taking some W's that you're not expecting it to. And as far as the moveset is concerned, I can't say that there is a nailed down for sure best moveset. I'd say overall you want to have Hydro Pump, but you could also use the fact that you want to have Hydro Pump to your advantage and just go with Ice Beam and Play Rough. Ice Beam's really nice to help take down the Noctowl and for baiting shields. Play Rough is really nice because a lot of Pokemon in this cup don't resist it, so you can just hit them for heavy damage. And then of course, Hydro Pump takes a long time to get there, but when you throw it and you land it, it's so good. So I'd say it's up to you, maybe your own particular strategy, what you're expecting to see in the cup, as far as what moveset you want to run on the Azumarill. And after June 20th, Azumarill is going to be having a little bit of a rough time because Beedrill is going to be everywhere. Beedrill can beat the Azumarill, but Azumarill does have some outs to Beedrill, and with Wigglytuff stocks going down, I could see Azumarill stocks going up. Especially since the alternative poison type Pokemon are going to be a little bit more afraid to come in because Beedrill beats them too. And then Confusion users are going to be even more on the rise because Beedrill. So I could see Azumarill working out better after the 20th. And then for the final group here, we have the floaty boys. They hover above the ground. Unlike anything else in this cup except for Bronzong, they hover. Alright, so as far as this group goes, I'd say Frostlass is kind of the star of the group. I mean, you swap in Frostlass, get a little bit of an energy advantage behind it, and if they're not responding with one of these normal Pokemon or a straight up Charm user, you're probably going to win that matchup, which is really nice. A lot of pressure coming from the Frostlass. And then on top of that, Frostlass beats the Noctowl in most situations. So if you were torn between these two Pokemon, maybe try using Frostlass first, see how it works out for you. As far as Noctowl is concerned, Noctowl has good neutral damage across the board and is a bit thicker than the Frostlass is. So in a late game situation, the Noctowl can actually take a hit, Frostlass probably can't. So that's the main thing I'd say that the Noctowl has going for it. In addition to suffering a big loss to the Frostlass itself, it's also completely dominated by the Bronzong, so for sure, before the 20th, I'd say this guy's probably a bit risky because, Noctowl could maybe finesse the Hypno matchup, but there is no finesse when it comes to the Belladoom hitting down on the Noctowl. Then as far as the Mould Breakers go, I feel like there's only a handful that are worth considering. Before the 20th, you're definitely going to want to think about the Alolan Sandslash, the Tentacruel, and the the Poison Grasses here, just because they are alternative options to handle the Wigglytuff. That said, after the 20th, I feel like the stock in them is going to drop a little bit because many of them, especially the grass-type Pokemon, are going to have a really hard time with the Beedrill there. But before the 20th, maybe even after the 20th, if you're not using the Bronzong on your team, you may want to consider one of these four Pokemon. And then the final Mould Breaker I'd think about would be the Glalie. And that's just because it's such a solid Pokemon. I mean, it looks like a solid ice ball, right? And yeah, it just kind of hammers its way through a lot of different Pokemon in this cup. That said, it can meet some heavy hangups, so I don't know. It's neutral, it's interesting. Think about it. Especially after the 20th, you might not even have counter users to hamper you in your quest of Ice-type glory. And those are my thoughts on the Sorcerous Cup. To rehash, 2 Pokemon from this group would probably be a good idea. 1 Pokemon from this group, if you don't have a Charm counter before the 20th, probably go with the Bronzong. If it is after the 20th, then you might be more in favor of the Hypno here. Then as far as this group is concerned, the Fairy types, pick one from this group. If it's before the 20th, you could consider going with both of them and have a good time. If it's after the 20th, well, you got Beedrill roaming around, and going with not Wigglytuff would probably be good. Maybe even neither after that could be a good idea, just because Beedrill is going to be everywhere, and Beedrill is vicious. And then picking one Pokemon from this group could be a really good idea as well. I definitely like the Frostlass over the Noctowl, but some people are more in favor of the Noctowl, and I think that's okay. because then I can beat them with my Frostlass. Going with both of them is also an option too, because they are good all-around type Pokemon. And then when it comes to the fighting type Pokemon, if it's before the 20th, flip a coin on Toxicroak or Medicham unless you got a better idea. And if it's after the 20th, then yeah, absolutely go with the Beedrill here. Beedrill is going to be insane. And that's about it. If you got any questions on this content, comment below, let me know what's up, and I'll be happy to help you out. If you got any spicy advice, maybe you got the secret strat in the Sorcerous Cup, well, maybe you could let the Swagman in on it and leave it in the comments there. And if you enjoyed this content, you want to see more like it, well, make sure to subscribe to SwagTips. SwagTips. I'd also like to give a special shout out to these Patreon supporters. If you want to support the Swagman on Patreon, link in the description.